What's up, everybody? Welcome to the brand new show on for Welcome to Primetime. And my friend Hunter was gracious enough to give me a spot here. And so this is the new show. It is called Sinister's Horror Stash, where we will every week we'll be talking about a different movie, whether it could be range from anything that we've seen, range from anything that we haven't seen, horror classics, some indies that maybe I've never heard of. I know Hunter said he's really excited to do that with me. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the show. And now let me introduce my co-host and my friend Hunter Chambless.
What's up, guys? Yeah, this is the new show here on Welcome to Primetime. Came up with this idea because I know you're trying to get into a lot of horror movies. I know a lot of horror movies, so maybe we can come in and kind of show you different horror movies that you've never seen before, kind of get your first thoughts on them. And we're starting off with a classic, 1968's Night of the Living Dead by director George A. Romero, the movie that really popularized the use of the zombie genre, which we would get a lot, going forward into like the Evil Dead, or not the Evil Dead, but the Walking Dead, and a lot of these different, big franchises. So let's start off with kind of your first thoughts on this horror classic, and then we'll just kind of talk about the movie as we go.
Yeah, man. So I really wanted to, for the first episode, do something that like is a classic that I have not seen. And I always thought like, oh, I was like, man, I must be missing a lot of classics. And actually, like going through some, I was like, oh, these are actually I've nailed a couple, a decent number of these. But one that I definitely needed to cover because I am a giant fan of the zombie franchise. I love Walking Dead. I love what is it? Dawn of the Dead. Like that's one of my Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite zombie movies. Even in this Living Dead universe, I've seen Land of the Dead, like the from maybe like early 2000s. Like I've seen a lot of these zombie movies, but I haven't seen the granddaddy of them all, the one that started it all, the legend. George A. Romero. That's a horror legend, and so had to knock it out for the first episode, and I love this movie. I did think in the beginning I did have a hard time getting into it. I did have a hard time, like just the kind of shock of it being 1968. It's a completely different, completely different way of filming a movie, especially a zombie movie. Seeing all where we're at now with zombie movies. So it was a little bit of like a shock, but man, like once I got into it, like the story is great. Like the story sucks you in. The action scenes, sure, they're not what you would expect, but like for the time. They're great, and like as the movie was going on, the tension was building. It like secretly like started building, and I'm really actually like sucked into this movie. So I enjoyed it a lot, and it made me like kind of see like the way that I got past the age and the effects and all that is the fact that like I can kind of see like, oh, okay, this is where this came from. The great things that I love about zombie movies. This is exactly where it started. So. I loved it. I think it was a great movie.
Yeah, so this movie had a budget of $114,000, which is nothing. So it came to the point where they had to use stock music from websites and stuff to be able to have the soundtrack for the movie, the scores behind the movie. That's how low the budget was. It ended up making about 30 million worldwide, which is a huge profit. But I really love this movie. I think it's a classic for a reason. It starts off and you kind of just get this uneasy feeling. It's like this brother and sister are going to pay respects to their father, and then you see the first zombie. Kind of looks like Herman Monster, which I found hilarious.
Yeah.
But and then you immediately get a first death with the brother getting his head smashed against the tombstone. So it really opens up in a way where it's contained. And then of course Barbara, our main lead, who we think is our main lead, runs and she gets trapped in the barn house, and that's where it's the central location for the entire rest of the film is this one barn. And what's great about that is they didn't have to use a lot of scenery. They didn't have to use a lot of different locations. It was one like I love movies that location because it makes you have to it closes everything in, makes it very claustrophobic, and especially with the zombies outside, it was a really good way of like, okay, they're trapped in this small location and they can't escape. So it's kind of just like everywhere you looked was this kind of claustrophobic feeling. I also love our main lead, which is played by Dwayne Jones. I think he is
Yes.
awesome, and I love that George Romero said he never intended to make this a race message, but that he made it. He just cast Dwayne Jones as a kind of a colorblind casting because he just did so well in the role that he just wanted him to be a part of the cast, and it was kind of cool, especially in the '60s, where it's like, a lot of directors probably wouldn't have cast a black actor, and George Romero just didn't see color. He just saw a great kick-ass, theater-driven actor who kicked ass in this role.
Yeah, absolutely. Dwayne Jones is amazing in this movie. It's what I want through for like all castings in movie. Like it's the ideal way. It's like just cast the person who fits the role the best. Cast the one who nails it. And Dwayne Jones obviously nailed it because, like you said, he's a badass in this movie. Like he's probably like he will probably make like a list of like top 10 badasses in horror films for me because he just like was like I know what I need to do, just get it done. I take no shit from anybody. Like I'm gonna go. Like this is how I'm gonna do it. If you don't want to do it, cool. But I did want to point out like one thing about the beginning of this movie is, and that I kind of surprised me, is how fast the movie started. How quickly it got straight to the point. There was no like unnecessary backstory of who these people are. Like there was genuinely like just because I guess how I was thinking of like modern horror movies. Is I was expecting like that to be like a fake out. Like I was like, is this guy a fake out? Is he like not a zombie? And then he turns out to be one. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like we're just getting into this. Let's go. So yeah,
because they only had like an hour and a half. Like this movie is very short, so I love horror movies that like get straight to the point. Like there's no like, for example, I love Hereditary. That's the type of movie that I think deserves to kind of flesh out its characters. But when you think of a zombie movie, you want to get straight to the action. You want to get straight to the point of why we're all here, which is the zombies. And immediately, George Romero knows what we want to see, and he kicks it right into gear, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in terms of movies, like the modern horror movies now, that like zombie movies are not seen as like those movies with deeper connections or deeper themes and stuff like that. But the ones that do, like say like A Train to Busan, like those do take the time to flesh out their characters. That's what you want from you. That's what I think everyone wants from their horror movies, and at least like this was the start of that zombie movie, the zombie movie genre, and it's kind of like it's kind of refreshing to see that it did start with that, and it did start at that kind of like in that vein of creating these characters that you're creating these characters that you're interested in, that you start to actually feel for and start to care about. And that's the crux of the movie, is that you care about who these characters are. Sometimes in zombie movies there could be fodder. There's like so much fodder in zombie movies, and this one there's not a specific role that they play, a specific purpose. And I think actually each character kind of had their moments, to shine. You have Tom, who's he doesn't seem like the toughest of guys. He's like the old classic kind of like shtick of like a vanilla man, and what he is. And like I wouldn't normally like him, but in terms of like his character and what he does, and he's just like, no, I want to survive. Like he doesn't seem like a man's man, but whenever it comes time for him to act, he has those characteristics, and I enjoyed it. And so seeing that in a horror movie, I mean in a zombie movie, this early on is refreshing, because there is a lot of bad zombie movies, like zombie movies that I enjoy that are can be pretty bad, but this one was very grounded. It was grounded. It took its time, and once it really got started, it just like kicked into full gear. So it's odd to say that. I still feel like I'm contradicting myself, but that's how it feels. Like these characters are fleshed out, but at the same time, the action is moving. The pace is really it's really well done. this film. So yeah, you can see why it's a complete and total classic.
Oh yeah, 100%. I also love looking back at this movie, and I go back to it and kind of seeing like, okay, he hired Dwayne Jones, and when you do that, when you hire a black actor, especially in the '60s, it changes the perspective of the movie. Even if George Romero said he wasn't out to make that statement. So when they're all trapped in the house, and I believe his name is Tom, gets really defensive, you don't know if it's because he's trying to survive or it's because he's refusing to listen to a black man who is in charge. So you have that kind of dichotomy of like, well, what really is the reason why he's acting so defensive? Is because he doesn't want to listen to a black man, or is it because he feels like he's too young and he doesn't know what he's doing? Or like, you have so many different possibilities that this movie could be saying, that going back, especially with like modern eyes, it's really interesting to see like, okay, this was done in the 60s and you got to put yourself back in that time period. So what was the message they're trying to say?
Yeah, and like that's the beauty about movies, about film, is that we can all, you pull what you pull from a film, because like watching the movie, that didn't even like cross my mind. Like the way that the characters are played, the way that especially Cooper is played, like he's not played like overly like, I guess, stereotypical white man in the 60s with the black man. Like he's like, it genuinely feels like this is just a case of like, these guys are trying to survive. They both have different ideas, and you get Cooper's side. You get like why he would feel like that. He's trying to protect his family, his wife, and his daughter, who we find out later in the film was bitten. So I can see, especially as a father, I can understand, like, in that moment, I was like, is he right? Is he wrong? I don't know. Like, it is kind of a tough choice. So, like, that's the beauty about the film, is that it's because George Romero is not trying to make trying to make a point and not trying to send a message. He's just telling a great story. You're able to not be hammered over the head with a message, but also appreciate the message that eventually people were able to pull from that. Because sometimes when you try to make a message movie, when you try to kind of like make a message in terms of a political message or something, it can feel heavy-handed and feel like kind of it won't land. But with this, it does, because that's not what the goal was. That's not what the point of the movie is. But the fact that you're able to pull that is just like paramount of like what he's able to do as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I also love the fact that Romero is not like, doubling down and defending himself all the time. He's like, well, that's the beauty of film. Like, he even said, he was like, maybe when I casted Dwayne in this role, maybe I did subconsciously make it about that. But he's not like taking that away from people who do see kind of this, this social message in there. He's not like doubling down and saying, no, then, that's not what I meant. It's just, he lets people have their opinions on his film.
All right, so let's go ahead and like dive into a little bit of the plot. So where we left off, let me pull up her name real quick. 1 second.
Barbara or Helen?
All right, start over again. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the plot of the film. We left off with Barbara running into the house, finding is it
Ben?
Ben, yes. I went go with your gut. Ben. In this house, this isn't his house. This isn't his house, but it is. I guess he had found it a little bit, and they ended up getting away from some of the zombies, and she's in complete shock. Barbara's in complete shock. She basically is not moving. She's not talking.
He's kind of tonic at this point.
Yeah, so that's when why I love Ben. He was just like in the like survival mode. Like, all right, I'm gonna cover up some of these windows. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
barricade us in so that we can be safe.
Immediately, he's getting shit ready to go.
Yeah, and he finds it, and he does find a rifle. So we do have a weapon
Mm-hmm.
in the house, and these are our two characters that we're following right off the bat.
The only problem I have with this film, and I'll say it right now since we're talking about Barbara, is, and George Romero even says this, and that's why in his other films like Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead, his female characters always are more badass and have things to do.
Yeah.
Is that in this one, Barbara just kind of doesn't do anything. She's just he even says he reverts her back to the damsel in distress characteristic that he never wanted to do in any of his other films. So he learned from this one and made his other female characters more badass and gave them more shit to do in the other sequels.
Yeah, and yeah, she is probably the weakest link of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't hurt the film at all. I think
No.
that it's just one of those things where you're like, oh, but she just didn't have much to do. But the other like female characters actually like I love
Helen.
Helen's great. I think she's I think that actress
awesome.
is putting in work, and you see that change that she has. So speaking of Helen, we do finds out that there are 5 people in the cellar of this house. You have Helen, we just mentioned. You have Harry, her husband, who's kind of like, who was that guy you were mentioning earlier. You have Tom. So he's the man that I was talking about.
And Karen, or and their young daughter Karen.
And their young daughter Karen. Yes, their young daughter Karen, and then you have Judy, who is Tom's girlfriend, wife. I forgot if I didn't know if he mentioned which one, but we have a whole house of characters now, and now we have the first conflict, which is the first human conflict, which is Harry wants to close up the cellar, stay in the cellar, and not basically just not deal with it, just be as safe as you possibly can, and Ben saying, no, we're going to stay up here and barricade. Like we can cover this house. We have the manpower to do it. Let's just, do it. And Tom is the one that's like he really wants he really wants everyone to get along and everyone to kind of agree. And Tom kind of agrees with Ben. Also, he also kind of like wavers. Like, well, I kind of understand Harry. Like, and that's why I think I started like relating to Harry, is because I kind of felt the same way. I was like, which is better? I kind of feel that like, okay, let's be safe. But then I also feel like that. Like, yeah, if something goes wrong, you only have one exit, and that's always a bad thing. Don't ever lock yourself up in a place with one exit. Not in a zombie apocalypse. But I love Ben because Ben's like, I don't care what you do. like you do what you got to do, but once you close that door and nail it shut, like that's it. Like you're not. It's our food. It's our he kind of draws a line in the sand. Like you can either go down there, or you can be up here. And he chooses to go. Harry obviously chooses to go downstairs and board it up, and that's when we get the first introduction of Helen, who is probably behind Ben my favorite character.
That's fair. Yeah, I think Ben is my favorite character in this film, just because, he's not a dumb character, and I'm so glad that Romero didn't make his main character dumb in a way. Like, an idiot. Like you immediately are like, okay, this guy's smart. He knows exactly what he's doing. He introduces them. They get a weapon. They start boarding up the shit. They have a gun. Like he's got everything ready to go. So immediately you're like, all right, I can trust this guy because, and he's our main character. You're like, okay, I can trust him because he's made all the right decisions so far going forward.
Yeah, we all love a competent main character in zombie movies and any horror, specifically zombie movies, because we've seen all kinds of different leaders. But he's a great leader. So Harry goes down and tells Helen what's going on. Once she finds out that there's a radio, that's when you kind of see the change in Helen, where she's like he's got the one thing that's like being able to communicate. Like you could very quickly just get lost down here, and that would suck. And I agree. And I had to rewire my brain of why it was just take the radio down and hold on. No, the radio is obviously huge.
It has to have a signal as well.
Yeah, it has to have a better signal. So I was like, oh yeah, duh. And then that's when she makes the change of we're going upstairs. Like this is not a smart plan. Which one? She calls him out on his BS. So like, would you rather be right? Is that important to you?
I love that. Helen's a character who will not just sit by and let her husband decide stuff for them. She's gonna fight back on both their behalves.
And she initially does like submit to him. That was the first instinct whenever he like told her, and she just like he kind of made a look, and she like just sat down, didn't say a word, and was just like okay. But when he mentioned the radio and like how like that's when that flip happened. She was like, oh no, like we are not staying down here. We're staying upstairs. We're going upstairs. Even though their daughter is clearly sick, and which you find out later, obviously she's been bitten.
I love that scene. Such a good scene.
As a like, and once you hear that she's been bitten, like as someone who watches all zombie movies, you're immediately like, oh, that's not good. But even Ben was smart enough to be like Ben was smart enough to be like that's not. She's clearly not okay. Like that but he mentions it of like who knows what kind of diseases those things have, like that. So kind of treated like an animal bite, or really human bite, because human bites are dangerous too. Don't get bit by people.
Don't bite people.
Yeah, don't bite people. Like it's gross.
I do want to say they're watching or they're listening to the radio and TV reports of the zombie attack, and they say that it comes from radiation from an exploding space probe returning from Venus, which caused the reanimation of the zombies.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to before you go into that, the use of the radio and the TV is really well done. This is probably the like very rare example of it's always show don't tell. This is one of the rare examples where tell because you can't show, like it really works. Like it's the world that he's building, which you're about to get into, like what this world that's being built, and obviously why they're able to make as many films about it as they can. So go ahead and go into like what they're building and what they're thinking, or really kind of like flat out saying like this is what it is.
Yeah, so I love going off of what you said, I love the idea of, because they didn't have a budget to show this big spacecraft and this big space, explosion, what they did was they set it in one location. And of course, if you still have TV and you still have radio, everyone's going to be cooped up in one location anyway.
Yeah.
That's an okay sign to be like, all right, let's get a news report, because of course they would want to know what's going on, and the news report at that time would be the most trustworthy, way of what's going on outside of this little bubble that they're in. So I love the idea that they all crowded around the TV, and you have the TV reports telling what's going on, and the idea that they used kind of a unique way of showing how the zombies are reanimation. It is the radiation from the exploding spacecraft, which was a big thing back in the 60s, where it's like people were worried about radiation. People were worried about, this stuff, especially going to another planet, doing space travel and things like that. So him using that kind of fear in a way of creating another fear. So creating another zombie, creating the zombie genre in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and it makes that's when the film kind of becomes a science fiction film, because I did see that whenever I was first putting it on, that was one of the genres on it. I'm like, science fiction. I was like, I guess like zombie films, I guess are kind of science fiction. But this is when like you got that real like science fiction feeling, like, oh, okay, like that's interesting. And knowing that there's more movies, you're like, that's how you kind of like are able to create this interest in this, and why you're able to make this like this initial zombie franchise. So yeah, I love the world building and the way it was told to us and shown to us, because like I said, smaller budget, not even just for the times, like just in general, like just a really tiny budget. But like because of the writing and because of the story, like it completely works. Never takes me out of it, and I'm interested every time that they go to the news, and that's when you're first introduced to this I guess deputy someone who's in that town, who's putting up a fight and trying to figure out what's going on. But they also give the worst advice, which is like, get out, try and get to the safety shelter. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
the
God damn it,
absolute worst advice.
but they're like, yeah, do that. Like, so
I love the line so much where the cop is explaining how to kill the zombies, and he's like, shoot him in your head, or shoot him in the head, even if it's someone you love, you have to bypass that shit just to shoot him. I'm like, damn, he does not give a fuck.
And he's like, you gotta drag them into the street and set them on fire.
Fire,
like,
yeah.
There are no, because they're trying to talk about like, what about? So that means there's no funerals, and he's just like, no, like why? Like
no funerals. You gotta burn the bodies.
Take them in the street and you burn the bodies. And I'm like, God damn.
He is ready.
But that creates that tension of like, oh, this is serious. Because imagine like seeing that on the television, you'd be freaking out.
100%.
But yeah, so we get to the one of the probably the coolest scenes is the scene where they try to get to the truck so they can get to these safety shelters again. The worst possible advice that you could have in a zombie movie is to leave the place. Don't leave where you're at. Try and hunker down as much as you can. But because they're trying to get to this place, they need to try to get to the shelter. They make an attempt to get the truck, and not only get the truck, but put gas in it. And as you would expect, it goes completely awry. The zombies, there's way more zombies. First of all, there's way more zombies that could possibly be. And there is an accident with everything because of the zombies. It didn't go well. This is where we lose. This is where we lose Tom and Judy. The truck catches fire and explodes. Ben is outside of the truck, obviously, so he doesn't get it. But he is completely surrounded by zombies. But this is when we see that fire really does kind of like able to ward them off. You don't have to you're not going to be completely swarmed, because that's how zombies a lot of times can in zombie movies feel unstoppable, is because if you get a giant group of them, you're going to be absolutely ripped apart. But because of the fire, he's able to get back to the house. Harry doesn't let him in. Hold on. All right, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that's when you get to see like the fire is a really helpful weapon in this world of like you're able to ward the zombies back and get back to the house. But we get the first when we get Harry really being an asshole here.
Yeah, he is. I don't know. I don't like Harry as a character, but I don't think you're supposed to. He's kind of that stubborn old man that like won't listen to anybody else because he always thinks he's right.
Yeah,
and I do not like those characters.
And this is the example of Harry kind of like doing that. Well, before it was like, oh, I kind of understand Harry, and then now it's like, oh no, now you're clearly in it for yourself. There's some kind of ego trip here, and it could possibly be like it could possibly be the race thing. That's probably the first, for me at least. That's the first feel of that. Of like,
that's the first thing I thought of.
Like I'm gonna be the hero, but I'm also like because of this specific reason. But Ben, being the badass he is, breaks down the door, gets in and locks it. And Harry at least is like smart enough to know like, well, I'm in here too, so I need to go help and close it. And then Ben decks him after they're safe. Ben decks him, and that's why I love this guy.
I love that.
He's just like, no, man, like you're not like you let me you're about to let me die. Like like if you're gonna stay in here, I at least gotta knock you out.
Oh yeah.
And then you have the argument, the whole thing going down, and in that moment, I mean, while this is going down, Karen is downstairs and is obviously dying. And
this scene is awesome, and it's also tragic, and
yes, but sorry, I forgot to mention that the ghouls did soon break through the doors. They're able to get through, and that's when Harry gets bit. Harry gets bit. He falls down the stairs, and that's when we find out that he dies next to his daughter, and then Karen wakes up, and absolutely destroys Helen. Helen is the like maybe the first feel like horror where I was like, oh, like they went for it on this one, because you have, especially for the time, you just have Karen stabbing over and over again. It doesn't
Yeah.
really pull away. The
With
cameras
one of
on
those garden
Karen.
shear type things, like the garden
Yeah,
what's it called? A trowel?
yeah, something like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
she so Helen is dead. Uh, Barbara's trying to help Ben get away from the ghouls, but her brother comes out of nowhere and takes her. It's so unceremonious. It's just like grabs her,
Yeah.
pulls her into the group, and that's it. She's gone. She's absolutely gone.
So did Barbara die? I'm counting that as a death because there's no way she's escaping that.
I'm counting as a death too, unless like in the next movies it shows up that she didn't. But at least for now, I think she's dead. Yeah, but Ben is able to make his way into the cellar, where
And
he.
this ending is so fucking tragic.
Yeah, and I love my tragic endings, but damn, like this,
Ah.
I knew the tragic ending going in,
Mhm.
but man, like it still hits, like it's still like, god damn it,
See, the
because
first time I watched this movie, I didn't know of the tragic ending. So imagine my face when I saw this happening. Ah,
like it's crazy,
heartbreaking.
man. Like so, he takes refuge in the morning. You find out that the posse that we had seen before, they basically were like, we got this, we got things good, like everything's fine. We're just kind of closing, we're kind of clearing everything out, like doing some
Yeah.
little, again, the ones that we missed and stuff like that. And they're going through, and they get to the house. Ben wakes up. He comes out the cellar, and in the moment, because they're looking in the house, they hear some noise. Don't know that Ben is alive, or that they don't realize that someone is alive, and they think that it's a ghoul. And this guy just flat out shoots Ben in the head. No one knows that they just killed a human being. They didn't kill a ghoul. It just ends, and it's just this heavy feeling, especially for a movie from 1968. You think like,
Yeah.
most movies have their tragic endings, yes, but they're not like as tragic. Like you even think of like Psycho at the time, like that doesn't have like the greatest ending, but it's not by any means a bad ending. It's
No,
just
because at least in that one in
he's
Psycho,
caught,
he's caught. He is in a mental institution, things like that. But
but
also
this is
again,
no.
no, going back to the race issue, it hits me harder because it is a black guy, and you know that, like, again, the idea of, did they shoot him because they just saw him and didn't realize he was a zombie, or did they shoot him because, hey, we don't know who this guy is, let's just go ahead and shoot him. We can say, we can claim that we didn't know who it was. So again, you have that kind of dichotomy of, well, what was their opinions when they shot Ben? And I know that George Romero said he didn't have any race undertones, and I do believe him. But when you cast a black guy, especially in 1968, and you have that particular ending, you're gonna have people stir up questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It does give that feel, but like in that moment, you're just torn apart about that ending. Like it's a
But also,
welcome.
like, Ben himself was a really well written character. That
Yeah,
when that happens, it hurts even more.
yeah. Like you're like this badass who just survived this night, with these ghouls taken out because by a mistake, maybe a mistake, maybe not a mistake. But I choose to lean towards mistake, and like it just sucks that that's the way that he goes out. But that's the ending of the movie, and it's it leaves you feeling down. But at the end, like it's such a great movie, and I like my bleak endings. Like one of my favorite horror movies of all time is The Mist, and that's got the bleakest ending.
Oh no!
So I like my bleak endings, and this is up there. That's why I gave this movie I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's really high up on my list.
Yeah.
And so having that, let's do what we did on the old Sinister's movie club. Let's go and look at the Rotten Tomatoes for this film, which we know is I know it's high. It has to be.
Oh, it
But
has to be high.
we will say, obviously, did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? And let's go ahead and pull it up. I'm getting it ready right now. Oh yeah, I mean, I think they got it right. It is at a 95% tomato meter. So that's obviously the critics.
Oh yeah,
and then you have the
I 100%
audience
agree with that.
scores. The audience score is 87%. I would actually argue that 87% might be maybe like a point or two off. I am in that. I am in that like 90s, like low 90s to mid 90s range.
I would put it around 90 to 95 personally.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorite movies. Like I can't give it super like 5 stars, but I mean it's a classic for a reason, and you see what all it did for not only the zombie genre, but for main characters, for main leads, for how to actually write a strong character. And to do this all on a budget. This was an indie movie, and this really showed the power of indie horror that we now see blossomed, especially in the past few years. There's tons of indie horror movies that are just incredible that people just don't talk about yet.
Yes, man. There's so many and that's what I love about like horror is that you can have these like very low budgets and just have fun with a movie. Like have fun with creating a movie, have fun with writing a story, and you don't have to necessarily. You're not trying to make a massive franchise. I think if you do, that's when you really start to hurt yourself in the storytelling aspect, where you can't go in looking to make a franchise, because if it doesn't hit, then all of a sudden you sacrificed certain elements because you're trying to do this one thing. Whereas you just got to make
the best
great characters and make a great story. You just have to make great characters and great story and create a world that's worth exploring, which I think George A. Romero did, because this might be my new franchise I'm diving into.
Oh, that's awesome. But an idea of that is what Ty West did with X. He made X into a really good solo movie, and then decided afterwards to write a prequel talking about Pearl, and now we're getting Maxine out this year, which is going to follow the characters from X. So he didn't set out to make this into a trilogy. He set out to make one good movie. I really love X. I really love Pearl. I'm super excited for Maxine.
Same here.
He didn't do the David Gordon Green Blumhouse thing where they announced 3 movies before the first one even comes out. I hate when they do that, because you have to bank success on one good movie first, and then if you want to do a sequel afterwards, build on that, not have 3 movies planned out in the pipeline, because if the first one isn't well received, then no one's going to watch 2 and 3.
Absolutely, man. I agree with you 100% there. But yeah, man, let's go ahead and get into what our next film is going to be for the next week. And this is the one that you brought, so I'm excited for you to announce it and why you chose this film.
So yes, next week our episode is going to be on 1985's Stuart Gordon classic Reanimator, which stars Barbara Gordon, Jeffrey Combs. It's a splatter body horror, just 80s classic. It harkens back to days of David Cronenberg when you talk about The Fly, you talk about all these type of movies, but Stuart Gordon absolutely did a masterpiece with Reanimator, and I can't wait to see what you think about Reanimator next week.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to give my thoughts on it. But yeah, man, let's go ahead and close this out. I am Sinister Alec Miller. You can catch me on Twitter at AlecMiller0423, which is it's not really where I'm at the most. But on TikTok at just Alec27. I don't really talk about much, but if you want to, I have some old videos that you can check out, and if I get some traction on those, I do make more. And also on Letterboxd at Sinister27. It's Sinister with a Y, SYNYSTER, which is where I am cataloging everything I'm watching this year, ranking everything that I'm watching, and trying to create my own all-time list, because I've never done that. So I'm having fun doing that, kind of going movie by movie. Even though I've seen it, I rewatch it, put it on the list. So check that out.
Hell yeah. If you guys did enjoy this, please hit the like button, subscribe to Welcome to Primetime down below. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys soon. Stay scared.